alive. And you will not be able to save them.
Hello, adventurer, and welcome back. Runescape has a plethora of interesting antagonists, such as Zamorak, Karapak, and even Zemorgul. But what do all of these bad guys have in common? They are simple pawns on the chessboard for the multiversal horror Zaltok that we will be covering in today's video. Based on the wiki, Zaltok is a mysterious entity associated with Blackstone, the undead, which is why I think it has something to do with the necromancy skill, and the oceans, as well as the phrase, "Do you really think you can save them?" which you're going to hear a lot this episode. Zaltok is an ancient entity that could be as old as the universe and the elder gods themselves. Sometime around the Great Revision that destroyed the previous universe, Ma's egg, which is Zeros and Saren's mother, had been corrupted with a scar of black stone. And we're going to be talking about black stone a lot today, which caused her to be born malformed and resulted in only 4 elder gods being active at the start of the new cycle. Although it's never outright said that this was Zaltok's doing, it is implied since the black stone that corrupted Ma's egg is of a similar nature to the other black stones we'll be talking about today. It is implied also that Zaltok has some association with Erebus, which oddly enough has been labeled as the afterlife for the followers of Zeros. We know that the ambassador summons portals from Erebus, meaning that there is some connection between Zaltok and the mysterious plane of existence. This, along with several other factors, leads me to believe that Zaltok intentionally corrupted Ma's egg to create Zeros and Saren. In other words, he is essentially the father of the 2 incredibly powerful gods, Zeros and Saren. All of the followers of Zaltok tend to be able to use both necromancy and ancient magics, creating another connection between Zeros and Zaltok. Also, both Zeros and Saren have a divine influence ability. The longer an individual is around them, the more influential they become to them, succumbing to any desire that Zeros and Saren have. This is very similar to the way that Zaltok can take control of people's minds simply by having his name heard or just being in the vicinity of a black stone. This leads me to believe this is an inherited trait from their father, Zaltok. It is also worth noting that the Soul Split ability that you get from Azanadra, one of the generals of Zeros, is the polar opposite of the Split Soul ability from the Eldritch Crossbow that is dropped from the Ambassador, connecting Zaltok and Zeros once again. In the upcoming Necromancy release, it is interesting to note that there will be a Split Soul Necromancy ability connecting Necromancy with Zaltok as well. This leads me to believe that the necrotic energy that was mentioned in RuneScape's news post is energy from the Schism, which I covered in my last episode. It is also already well known that the most powerful necromancers that are already on RuneScape, such as Oreb the Magister, Taraket the Necromancer, and the Undead Ambassador himself, are on Team Zaltok. It is incredibly interesting when you start looking into the Ambassador and Taraket to how the Dragonkin came to be on Zaltok's side to begin with. In the previous universe, before the Elder Gods destroyed it, the Dragonkin escaped by creating a rip in space-time and escaping into the Abyss. It is my belief that while they were in there, some of them made contact with Zaltok. For example, the Ambassador tells of a story that his grandmother would tell him when he was little of this black pebble. It is my belief that the black pebble is the black stone that is mentioned so frequently in Zaltok lore. It is interesting to note, though, that there is a couple of disambiguations between a few of the realms. I just mentioned the Abyss, which was described as such, but there is also Erebus, which is the Zerosian afterlife, which could potentially be the same realm, also known as the Shadow Realm. We know from the most recent quest, Twilight, that there are incredibly powerful beings within this realm that are even capable of taking down an Elder God, such as when Karapak lured the Leviathan out and attacked Jazz, dragging it into Erebus. Which is interesting to note because if the Dragonkin had survived a great revision in Erebus, now you have Carapac, a shadow anima scientist, trapped in Erebus with an elder god that it has limitless energy to experiment on. So what kind of horrific things could Carapac be doing inside of Erebus? Also, he could potentially be under the watch of Zaltok while in there. It is also worth noting that currently inside of Erebus is Zeros and Shar, one of his generals, as well as several other notable individuals. There are also 2 artifacts inside with all of this motley crew of people, so something horrific is going to be coming out of Erebus very soon. It is worth noting that when Zeros went to Erebus through the monolith, he was quoted as saying, "What I seek cannot be found in this universe, and so I go in search of another. I have the apparatus I require, the material to shield myself, a tool to guide me in that place, and an offering for those who rule there. My God." During Extinction, Saren also gives us a foreboding warning. Such a word means nothing to the forces of Erebus. It is a realm of entropy, not life, and it will do nothing but consume and destroy. It mindlessly seeks power, nothing more. It can feel the eggs, talking about the elder eggs. That must be why its mouth opened now, right above us all. There's something on the other side searching for them. Carapac is quoted saying, "The portal, it goes to the source of all shadow anima." And that brings us to Raksha. The connecting factor here is during the fight with Raksha, he will scream out, "I will drag you into Erebus."
I will drag you into Erebus.
Raksha can summon shadow anima onto the fight field.
Do not let him absorb the shadow!
Raksha also has a very connected past to the Dragonkin. During the First Age, Raksha was originally a normal dinosaur that lived on Runescape thousands and thousands of years ago. At some point, Raksha found the Codex, which is what Zeros used to travel to Erebus, or the Monolith, and it imbued him with immense amounts of shadow anima, turning him into the Shadow Colossus. However, the power did not come from the Elder Gods, but from somewhere else. This power caused Raksha to grow, large and intelligent and savage, and it was now capable of communicating with others through visions, as it did with the Ambassador when it gave him his religious vision that turned him into a Zaltok follower to begin with. A Dragonkin hunter named Varanus of the Nodon faction managed to trap Raksha. The Kendra Council later had Raksha transported to Orthan, imprisoned in a pen constructed by Nodon architects. Deeply fascinated by Raksha, the Dragonkin Carapac began to thoroughly study the imprisoned dinosaur and its abilities, and Carapac was able to remove traits from Raksha and put it into 3 other dinosaurs, which became the Rex Matriarchs. These were the earliest prototypes for dragons, considering Carapac created the dragon race. Cranon considered Raksha to be the source of his religious inspiration after it projected a hateful vision to him, meaning that Raksha has played an incredible storyline in RuneScape's history with Zaltok. When speaking of established Zaltok lore, one cannot fail to mention the skeletal horror from the Rag and Bone Man quest. These skeletal remains are of a long-dead Moanu. This abomination also drops a journal decaying the life of these Moanu and even the gods they worshipped on their homeworld. The only remains of the Moanu in current RuneScape are the horrors that plague Mostly Harmless and also protect the Ambassador at the Shadow Reef, a guardian or mouthpiece for Zaltok. Here are a couple of interesting lines from the journal. "Blood is the gift, blood is the price. So demands Tezcatlipoca his price for raising up the Moanu above the lesser species. In the beginning, there was only darkness, a shadow in which only Tezcatlipoca set. As time moved forward, the stars came to light to illuminate the darkness, and they cast their dim light over the newly born world of German. on our world, intrigued by this new world, Tezcatlipoca turned his attention to the surface, his great burning eyes plunging the world into brilliant light. But the world was still empty, the jungle silent and devoid of life. This reminds me of when the ambassador says, "So you come to witness this great moment, to be present as his gaze is turned upon this world, to be one of the first blessed by his black radiance. I can understand such dreams." It goes on to say, the bored Tezcatlipoca reached his hand across the world and pricked his finger upon a mountain. His blood flowed down the surface and mixed with the stone and trees, and essentially created the Moanu, who they called strong as stone. The Moanu actually had several gods that they worshipped, but let's talk about Tezcatlipoca first. Him being a mythical deity, they of course worshipped him. Another encounter that it details is how the cave horrors and all the other horrors came to Runescape. Essentially, they were being defeated by the lesser tribes of their homeworld, and they encountered a pure black lake which whispered to them, and from this, black hands emerged and brought them to Runescape. Now, on the wiki it does note that this is possibly Zaltok himself, however, I'll leave that up to you to decide. It could be a general or a duke, an underling to Zaltok, as he does tend to infect people's minds and use them as conduits. But regardless, he is the puppet master. The skeletal horror is said to be the physical representation of one of these gods called Nyarla Hydra, which is typically shown being made of bone and strung together with sinew. These Moanu even have a fertility god named Uvhastur. It is sort of a mother deity to the horrors, who represents the god with a carving of black stone. The carving appears to possess vague hints of a woman's body, but without arms, and whose legs are instead a mass of tentacles. Sounds super hot. It has a large number of heads, all of which emerge from a neck made of even more faces. And the final deity mentioned in this Zaltok pantheon in the Pestilent Journal is a lunar deity named Yog-Sathla. It is a stone carving depicted as a single eye that reminds the viewer of the corpses of decaying fish. The horrors do not worship this deity, they instead fear it and use its name as a curse. And it reminds me of something the Fremenic V said when he mentions he traveled to a world that Zaltok had visited. He described the world as an ocean of corpses and states that it has already set foot on Runescape and taken hold. Ironically, the place where you fight the skeletal horror is directly underneath of this abyssal rip, which I've already explained why I think these are tools that Zaltok uses. In fact, Bilrak, the Majorat under Daemonheim, spent his entire lifetime trying to find one of these rips to bring his master Zamorak through to Runescape. On the wiki, it even mentions an incident where the Calgerian demons attempted to use a Majorat ritual marker to summon Zaltok to the bottom of Daemonheim. Having all of these things right next to each other, as well as Fort Ferenthri, which is meant to be one of the hubs of necromancy, is no coincidence at all. We've talked about the ambassador plenty this episode already. However, I haven't exposed to you one of the most juicy pieces of evidence that I have that Zaltok is returning. The Elite Dungeons 1 through 3, and even 4, which I could go into for a long time, are connected to Zaltok. In the first Elite Dungeons, Siryu is actually trapped inside of black stone shackles. In the second Elite Dungeon, you have the Blackstone Dragon, who was created by Carapac, a shadow anima scientist. And in the Elite Dungeon 3, you have the mouthpiece for Zaltok himself, the Ambassador. Well, I've been reaching out to some of the J-mods on Twitter for advice or tips, and Mod Orion was kind enough to help me out and suggesting that I look at the Temple of Amnesia at the Azure Room. I ended up reading up on what was inside of this room, and I found a very interesting passage. It reads as follows. The spiral of time leads only to the gaping maw of eternity. The well is guarded from interlopers. It will be the doorway. The 7 heads of the Hydra are at the ambassador's beck and call. The spiral of time leads only to the gaping maw of eternity. The thing that made this so profound for me wasn't even the fact that a JMod had told me this. It was the fact that Mod Orion is actually the ambassador himself, having voiced him for all of the transcript. The first passage, the spiral of time leads only to the gaping maw of eternity, is most likely a reference to Jas, the elder god, who is a spiral of time, being dragged into Erebus by the Shadow Leviathan. The second part is the juicy part though. The well is guarded from interlopers. It will be the doorway. As I'm sure all of you know, the upcoming necromancy skill has a well involved in it, the Well of Souls, which is what Rasael seeks to reclaim and destroy. Now, we know that followers of Zaltok are known for necromancy, so I think this is a clear-cut connection between the first necromancer and the shadow god Zaltok. Also, in many of the arts depicting the upcoming necromancy skill, there are schisms or abyssal tears in the actual scenes. Another thing is that Jagex actually released some of the necromancy abilities, and one of them is called Split Soul. Well, Split Soul is also an Eldritch Crossbow ability, and that's what connects Zaltok to this skill as well, since the Eldritch Crossbow is dropped by the Ambassador. The next line, the 7 heads of the Hydra are at the Ambassador's beck and call. On the wiki it says this is a reference to the pirate group that helped with the Elite Dungeon 1 fiasco, but I think this is incorrect. The 7 heads of the Hydra, in my opinion, are the 7 Magisters of Terragard, which we chatted about in the last episode. It says that they are at the Ambassador's beck and call, and since we know they use the Schism for power, this could be a reference to that. Or perhaps this is a reference to the slain Lornab, the Hydra of Misthalin that Zero slayed and used its power to open a portal to Infernus. The final line of this is, "The spiral of time leads only to the gaping maw of eternity," repeating the first line. What do you think about the Azure Room and the mysterious lectern? I definitely think that it's an interesting piece of evidence, and it really blew my mind to read this. If we look at virtually every quest and storyline on RuneScape that involves some sort of necromancy, we get a hint of Zaltok's presence. Even in stuff like the Zogre Flesh Eater quest, the wizard that is causing the Zogres to be reborn inserts a black prism at the Ogre burial site, causing Zogres to appear. It's also worth noting during the 2018 Halloween event, the player has to help the 4 horsemen to fight off Black Hands and Lucian that has been revived from the dead through some sort of necromancy. Before the release, a black shard would appear in players' inventories. Upon examining it, it would say, "Do you really think you can save Moya?" Clearly pointing to Zaltok. During the event, you actually fight off a few species from Daemonheim, as well as being teleported to a warped floor on Daemonheim, connecting this event to Zaltok once again. This is obviously important because the upcoming full necromancy requirements require the Nadir saga, which is about Moya and Bilrak finding the ritual marker on the bottom floor of Daemonheim, and Kaldurian demons attempting to summon Zaltok directly to RuneScape. During the creation of this video, while scouring over every tidbit I could find on both necromancy and Zaltok, I found an interesting connection between the upcoming necromancy skill and the world of Erebus, which I explained why it could be connected to Zaltok. In necromancy, you will use runes, but not the regular class of runes created with anima on RuneScape. It will be created with what I assume to be shadow anima, but in the previews, I noticed that the background looked very familiar. If you look, this background to these clips are identical to Erebus that you get to go into after the Battle of the Monolith. This is definitely something I don't think they intended to put out, but if you look at it, it seems pretty convincing to me. During my research, I discovered that these rune crafting altars for the necrotic runes are actually not called altars, they're called idols. And typically, an idol is dedicated to a god, and this made me think of Zeros' quote about an offering for those who rule Erebus. Earlier we talked about the 4 Moanu gods and how they are related to Zaltok and Erebus. Potentially these 4 gods could be related to each of these idols representing one of the elements involved. I originally intended this video to be only around 10 minutes long, but I had so much fun doing research and found so many interesting things, I had to share them with you today. Let me know what you think down below in the comments section. If Zeros has no relation to Zaltok, then why does Raksha, the first one who spoke of Zaltok to the ambassador, threaten to drag you into Erebus, the Zerosian afterlife? Why does Sliske, the necromancer, former Zerosian, imbue us with shadow anima to go into Erebus? Why does it say in the Azure room, the well will be the entrance? And in the new update, Rasael says things to the player and says he wants to investigate the Codex. Why does Rasael want to control the well? Do you think Zeros could be the son of Zaltok and Ma? And what is Carapac doing to Jas in Erebus with unlimited shadow anima? So while literally making the thumbnail for this video, I noticed probably one of my most conclusive pieces of evidence that Zeros is indeed Zaltok's son. If you look here, this is the Zeros damaged armor before he is repaired. If you look at his armor, the pieces that are coming over the top of his shoulders are literally hands. The same hands that can be identified at the Blackstone Dragon and the Ambassador, connecting Zeros to Zaltok once again. Don't forget to like this video, leave me a comment, and let me know what you think. Today, I have a very unique style of lore video prepared for you in Runescape conspiracy theories. As many of you know, I'm particularly fascinated by the mysterious dark god of Erebus, Zaltok. I recently realized on my main account that I had not completed the Pirate Quest series finale, Pieces of Hate. I was excited to finish it because the Pirate series is the very first one that you encounter the forces of Zaltok in. So, me being fascinated with this subject, it was the perfect opportunity to get my nerd hat on. My favorite thing about this was the opportunity to do even more research on the dark god Zaltok. Zaltok is a god represented by a blackstone claw, often appearing in oceans and being related to the undead. Typically, there are portals associated with Erebus attached to Zaltok, and it's an incredibly mystical and terrifying figure. In the Pirate Quest series, a pirate named Rabid Jack seeks to turn the world into zombies for Zaltok's army by taking over a rum distillery and infusing the product with black stone, used by Zaltok to exert a corrupting influence. You can see this in examples of boss monsters such as the Ambassador and the Blackstone Dragon. The player, of course, has to step in and stop this insidious plan on many different occasions. With this being an opportunity to stop Rabid Jack once and for all, I knew I had to take my chance so I could save RuneScape. If you would like a complete synopsis of the Quest series, I certainly recommend checking out my good friend ACPL's Pirate Quest review. The link will be in the description. Starting off the quest, Pieces of Hate, you are sent to an island prison guarded by pirates under the influence of Zaltok. After making friends with a super cool rat, you ascend upstairs to an area where humans are being gestated into horrific Crassian abominations. In the egg room, one may easily overlook the creepiest and perhaps most mysterious NPC I've ever encountered. Zaltok. Oops, I mean a tiny little kitten. You may think I'm crazy, but throughout the quest, this kitten keeps reappearing, guiding the player onward with creepy and foreboding messages. But probably the creepiest thing of all is what it says to you right before the finale of the quest. The kitten states that it's not really a kitten and that we are not really human. This might just seem like something random, but it also drops the tagline of Zaltok: "Do you really think you can save them?" This may seem all fine and dandy, however, there's something that most people probably didn't notice when completing this quest. When you go and talk to the pirate at the end to leave after the Rabid Jack fight, which mind you, you fight a giant Blackstone hand during this, After the boss fight with Rabbit Jack, when you go to Madame She and ask to leave, if you ask her about the kitten, she says there is no kitten, meaning that this entire time the kitten has been inside of our head. Now, what does this tell us? Especially with the kitten also telling us that we are not really a human. I think I've found the identity of Zao Tak. You may be saying to yourself, bro, this doesn't prove that this is Zao Tak. However, throughout the quest, there's been many references to kittens, including this cutscene here. When speaking to the kitten at the Shadow Reef, it actually says that something led you here and pulled the strings, kind of inferring that the kittens pulling on the string and playing with it are Zao Tak. It is becoming more common for references to Zao Tak manipulating faith, including the kitten talking about what lies ahead as an inevitability. I would also like to mention that the actual colors of the kitten match the realm of Erebus that we know Zao Tak to be residing in, with the blues and shimmering colors. The fact that the kitten exists inside our own head may have significance as well. What if we are in fact Zao Tak? It is often that Zao Tak infers that we are ourselves a monster, and is described as a hole in the soul. Perhaps the player has to be created in order for Zao Tak to enter this world. I know that's kind of been inferenced in several quests, including the well will be the doorway in the Azure Room, talking about the Well of Souls. I'm curious though what you guys think, and I appreciate you diving down this RuneScape rabbit hole with me today. Let me know if you think the kitten is Zao Tak, what you thought of this video, or perhaps even if you think the player ourselves happens to be this dark god. I appreciate you all so much. Without further ado, you may put away your wand and unstring your bow. We're done with our adventure, homie. Hello, brave adventurers, and welcome to today's highly requested RuneScape documentary, Zeros, Necromancy, and the Gods of Erebus. To kick off today's video, we're going to be taking a look at one of RuneScape's most beloved and mysterious gods, Zeros. Zeros once ruled a massive empire consisting of almost the entire world we know as RuneScape. Toward the end of his reign, one of his generals, Zamorak, betrayed him and overthrew him, slaying him, for a time, with the Staff of Armadil, an elder artifact. After Zeros was slain, his entire empire fell into ruin. The only information that we have about this empire are some of the immortal beings who still exist that tell us of this, as well as many archaeology and quest lore books that give us some insight on the Zerosian Empire. One of the few established facts about the dark god Zeros is his promise to shepherd the souls of his followers to the Zerosian afterlife of Erebus. In the modern era, we know Erebus to be a realm of entropy and chaos, and home to some horrific abominations. In the boss fight with Raksha, it even threatens to drag you into Erebus. Why would this be a threat if it's heaven? In the lore book, Scions of Erebus, it essentially says that it's ridiculous that souls would be shepherded into Erebus, comparing this to putting sewage in a reservoir of drinking water. Some other interesting facts about Erebus include the ambassador Cranon summons portals to Erebus during the boss fight. Erebus contains shadow leviathans strong enough to subdue an elder god with a single tentacle. Erebus is thought to also contain shadow anima. However, based on Mod Raven's statements, it appears there is a quote, end quote, something else called anathema, which he says Erebus is comprised of. So why does the mysterious god Zeros promise his followers this hellish afterlife of Erebus. For a long time, it didn't seem to make any sense to me. Why, Zeros? We also know that the forces of Erebus had a hand in Zeros' creation, as the elder god Ma, the mother of Zeros, Saren, and the Majorat. Ma was corrupted while in her egg, causing her to be malformed, and during her exile on Runescape, the Majorat homeworld, she created Zeros and Saren to be her companions. These companions represented the unity of anima and shadow anima, with Zeros obviously representing the shadow. This had been conjecture for many years until the events at the Battle of the Monolith, which led to Azanadra being turned into a god by Zeros' departure into Erebus. Azanadra states that this power that ascended him to godhood is the very same power that corrupted Ma's egg to begin with, indicating that Erebus, whether through intent or accident, had a hand in Zeros' creation. But it still really did not make sense to me that Zeros would be collecting souls and sending them into Erebus, so I knew I needed to look deeper. I was reading through all of the Sintistan archaeology mysteries recently for a different video that I'm working on, and for those who don't know, Sintistan is the capital city of Zeros, and I was pretty shocked at some of the stuff I found. There are a ton of parallels between the Zerosian Empire and the Roman Empire in real life. They had a sect of secret police called the Inquisitors who would essentially seek out heretics and blasphemers who would seek to cause dissent to the Lord Zeros. One of these Inquisitors left behind a journal detailing his service for the Zerosian Empire. During this journal, Aurelius details his account of investigating the Majorat Sliske, of whom he suspects of committing heresy.
I thought you might say that, so I've brought a little surprise for you. Try not to get too excited. Now, where were we?
And this is where the most profound line of the entire journal comes forth. While following Sliske through the Shadow Realm, Aurelius tracks him all the way to the mysterious monolith and catches him speaking to it or observing it. Aurelius can hear this whispering coming from the monolith. In fact, he had been hearing this whispering for weeks up until this point, and we finally have a name to the voice that he hears. When Aurelius asks the monolith directly, "Who is whispering to me?" it answers, V-O-S, Voss. Now, upon hearing this, it immediately made me think of the Elder Gods, since all of their names are a single syllable and a three-letter word. But the monolith contains shadow anima, and we know that Elder Gods are incredibly allergic to shadow anima, so it couldn't be an Elder God inside of there, could it? This did potentially point to the existence, however, of a new class of gods. Now hear me out, a shadow Elder God. This could perhaps explain how Ma's egg became corrupted to begin with. This god could have been attempting to reproduce with her, but ended up corrupting her egg and causing Ma to give birth to Zeros, a representation of his cerebral roots. This would explain his affinity with the cerebral elements of smoke, blood, shadow, and ice, as well as explain his allegiance to Erebus. It made me wonder if there were more hints in this journal that could maybe prove Zeros was lying to us about Erebus. During the Inquisitor's journal, Voss whispers to Aurelius over the course of several weeks, promising to return his family from the dead, as well as help him obtain evidence that the Majorat Sliske was guilty of heresy. This whispering of promises reminded me of the deity that I'm most fascinated with.
You trespass on a sacred moment.
In one of the other Sintistan lore books, A Critic's Review, it refers to Voss as the King of Whispers. This is interesting because this is a very similar way that Zaltok communicates with people, promising them salvation, but in turn providing damnation. Now, I don't think Voss is Zaltok, but I do think that they are distinct entities that rule Erebus, and I have some really good proof for that. Bro, a rift to another universe is the Examine. Oh my god. Raziel is literally standing right here. During the necromancy storyline, you find out that necrotic energy, used for necromancy, is a source of magical energy from Erebus, cited in a conversation with Raziel where he admits the runestones or altars that he created for necromancy actually channel anima from Erebus, the so-called Zeroshian afterlife.
Of necromantic elements taken from Erebus. I was right.
In the Necrolord quest, we attempt to reanimate a fallen necromancer named Eudora, and during the ritual we use to summon Eudora, Voss is mentioned by name in the form of Vos Da, accompanied by Zhao Ma and Tak Ma, which seems to confirm that Vos and Zhao Tak are separate entities. But that also implies that Zhao Tak might be two entities, but we'll cover that in another video, as today we want to explore Zeros' great lie. We know very little about Voss outright, aside from the fact that it speaks from the monolith and resides in Erebus, but why would the Zeroshian afterlife be home to a horrific deity known as the King of Whispers? Probably because Zeros is lying to us. When speaking to Death and Icflarin, they confirm that they have never shepherded a soul to Erebus, and that it vexes them greatly, adding to the proof that Zeros is outright lying about Erebus in conjunction with the earlier mentioned statements about the scions of Erebus saying putting a soul in Erebus, a human soul anyway, is like putting sewage in a reservoir of drinking water. Why would Zeros lie though? From my research, I have concluded that Zeros was in fact worshipping, or at minimum communicating with this god Voss of Erebus, that whispers promises of a way to defeat the Elder Gods, or a way to ascend to Elder Godhood, as we know Zeros wants. During the tale of Aurelius, when Aurelius and Colton follow Sliske into the Shadow Realm, they observe Sliske speaking with the monolith, and upon Aurelius hearing it whisper, it promised to return his family as long as he opened the monolith. He reaches out toward the monolith and is suddenly confronted by the dark god Zeros. Immediately, Zeros snapped shut the monolith, and Aurelius could no longer hear the whispering of Voss. What it says next in the journal gave me cold chills down my spine. I knew now that this was a sacred place, a place belonging only to Zeros, a place where he could enact his divine will without interference or distraction. In our blind curiosity, we had trespassed upon this ground. Does this mean that Zeros worships Voss since his afterlife is Erebus? Or at the bare minimum, it means that he was researching the monolith for his own purposes? It seems that only Zeros and Sliske were the ones granted access to this site, which may partially explain Sliske's prowess with traversing the Shadow Realm as well as using necromancy, since necromancy comes from Erebus. This also implies that Sliske perhaps was in on Zeros' big lie to begin with, to convince his followers that Erebus was a heavenly afterlife for the pious that worshipped Zeros. But why would he do this? With the new necromancy questline, we find out that souls are actually used in conjunction with the Well of Souls to gather necrotic energy, and the more souls you have, the more powerful you are. And there's a variety of rituals that a person can perform depending on how many souls they have at their disposal. One of the rituals that we have a detailed account of is Crannon's ritual performed at the Shadow Reef. He gathered 10,000 souls with the help of Oreb the Magister in order to perform a ritual to summon Zhao Tak. One could assume that the Monolith and Vos were asking Zeros to perform a similar ritual, as we know Vos wants to escape, given it asking Aurelius to open the monolith. This is a spooky implication given that we need 30,000 souls at the end of the Alpha and Omega quest, in which Raziel warns us of an impending universal threat.
I may not be able to return in time to stop the shadows. Perhaps we shall meet again in a future age, should you not fail to preserve this universe.
This would make sense considering if the ambassador gathered 10,000 souls to summon one of these shadow gods, it would take 30,000 to summon the three of them, Vos, Zao, and Tak, if Zao Tak is two separate entities. Regardless, we know Zeros is collecting souls of his followers, as both Death and Ixalan state that they have never taken a single soul to Erebus, meaning that Zeros is hanging on to them. In my opinion, he's most likely hanging on to these souls to perform some sort of grand necromantic ritual. Similarly to how when he killed the demigod Lornab, he used its divine energy to open up a portal to Infernus, bringing the demons of Infernus to Runescape. Ironically enough, Zeros is currently inside of the monolith looking for a way to defeat the Elder Gods. He enters into it during the Battle of the Monolith mini-quest, in which shadow breaches threaten to destroy Gielinor, and the Elder Gods are attempting to cause a great revision which would destroy the universe. Prior to this, he personally asked Jazz to take his mother Ma's place as an Elder God, which she denied, causing Zeros to seek his own way to ascend to Elder Godhood. Before Zeros enters the monolith, he says something that still haunts me to this day. What I seek cannot be found in this universe, and so I go in search of another. I have the apparatus I require, the material to shield myself, a tool to guide me in that place, and an offering for those who rule there. This could be the thousands of souls he collected. It could be a reference to the elder god Jas being lured into Erebus by the action Zeros set into motion, but it could also refer to a number of elder artifacts he possesses. But regardless, this confirms his intentions to seek out the gods of Erebus for help. Perhaps Voss was whispering to him all this time. After Zeros enters the monolith, his general Azanadra receives an ascension to godhood via shadow anima, which was confirmed by Mod Raven in our one-on-one podcast to have been intentional. Azanadra states something later that shocked me though. He states the energy that corrupted Ma's egg, Zeros' mother, to have been the same force that empowered him at the monolith, which has horrific implications, as this would mean the god of Erebus had a hand in the creation of Zeros and Saren. This has been something I have suspected for a long time, as many of the followers of Zeros use shadow spells, which often summon black hands, such as the Angel of Death and the regular Nex encounter, as well as Zeros' damaged armor having black hands on it, as you can see in this picture. For those lorehounds watching this, you already know that Zaltok is associated with Blackstone hands, as seen in Pieces of 8, the Blackstone Dragon, and in the Ambassador fight, who is the mouthpiece of Zaltok on RuneScape. All of these are subjects of Zaltok, further pointing to Zeros' involvement with these forces. Also, the Ambassador literally summons portals from Erebus, the Zerosian afterlife. Since we mentioned the Pieces of Hate quest, I find it interesting that in this quest it talks about manipulating fate and things being inevitable and putting things into place. Well, Zeros is often known as the god of fate, and in the Necromancy spellbook, there's even a spell called the Threads of Fate. The Necromancy spellbook further connects to Zeros when unlocking the Split Soul ability, which is also the ability of the Eldritch Crossbow dropped from the Ambassador. The Split Soul ability works in tandem with the Zerosian prayer Soul Split, which is actually unlocked in Sintistan from one of Zeros' generals, Azanadra, connecting the two once again. Zeros doesn't seem outright evil, but he has perhaps been fooled into working for the forces of Erebus. During the Necrolord quest we mentioned earlier, the Necrolord Utera is reanimated from the dead with our ritual, and comes back as a stronger, horrific form of himself in the shape of an Edemu, and says progress requires sacrifice, a similar mantra to Zeros and his rule. For a long time, I suspected that Zeros let Zamorak defeat him intentionally, but now I'm certain this is the case. I believe he did this in order to set in motion the creation of the correct circumstances for his resurrection to come back more powerful. It seems for a long time, Zeros had been communicating with Voss through the monolith. Perhaps it convinced him to let Zamorak strike him down, so he could be reborn and come back stronger. As you see in the fight with the ambassador, he says, "Come now, shed your mortal form and rejoice."
Come then, shed your mortal form and rejoice.
And the kitten from Pieces of Hate quest saying your body is a prison. This implies that letting go of your mortal form is a way to ascend into something perfect. This is even cited in the Night at the Theater mystery that I mentioned earlier, where there are some spooky similarities between some of the texts that Cranon wrote about Zaltak and the story about Voss. In the Night Theater mystery, Critics Review 5, it says, quote, "The actors are inconsequential. They are mere vessels of the words, mere mouths from which the author can speak. Each of them exists for one shining night, one brief moment, where they are raised from irrelevance and emptiness to the role of an artist. On that stage they are transformed from a weak, base thing of flesh and need into a transcendent creature of pure poetry. They lived as nobodies, as nothing, and their lives conclude in theatrical perfection. I weep at the simplicity of it, the elegance." This is incredibly similar to what Cranon writes in the Journal of Revelation 1 regarding Zaltak. "I know what went wrong before, why we only managed a brief glimpse of his magnificence. The ritual was flawed, too quick, too simple, too small. It's obvious, of course. Great music builds to its crescendo. It doesn't demand it immediately. I need to find the instruments. I need to find the right choir, not just Dragonkin. I need the others who this life has failed, others willing to see the bigger picture, the solution to our problems, others who need to be saved." These comparisons lead me to believe that the Erebus gods tend to represent facets of art or consciousness as opposed to the elder gods in our universe representing tangible elements such as fire or Jas representing time. Could the Erebus gods be where free will stems from, a necessary evil in order for consciousness to exist? It's also worth noting that the elder gods typically regard sentient life as meaningless. During the Great Revision at the end of each universe, they care very little that they kill billions of creatures in their existing universe, whereas the gods of Erebus seem to need consciousness in order to exist, spread, and grow, as seen with driving people mad, and using these individuals in Runescape who are abandoned or have tragic stories in order to fulfill their plots. I believe this is what we are seeing with Zeros. We already know from Azanadra that the forces of Erebus corrupted Ma's egg that gave birth to Zeros. So what if this entire time they've been manipulating the threads of fate to create this god for some purpose? They tend to prey on people who have tragic storylines. Zeros was born on Runescape to a mentally stunted mother, only there with his sister for eternity. He eventually escapes and intends on becoming an elder god, and makes many attempts at creating life, but fails repeatedly. And once again tries to become an elder god by asking Jas to help him ascend, denied again. And I believe that this god Vos intentionally has preyed upon this, whispering to Zeros for thousands of years until he finally succumbed. I truly believe the connection runs deeper than this, though. Zeros arguably wouldn't even exist without the forces of Erebus corrupting his mother's egg, as confirmed by Azanadra. This would imply that they intentionally created Zeros, and he is just one of the many puppets manipulated by the threads of fate, as implied by the kitten in Pieces of Hate. Even though I believe the gods of Erebus had a hand in creating Zeros, I don't believe this is a family relationship we have going on. Who knows though, maybe Zeros is in Erebus playing catch with Daddy Vos. All jokes aside, but I do definitely think that Zeros looks to Vos for leadership, information, and he may even worship him. Something that I'm sure you didn't notice because I overlooked it many times is that Zeros' literal throne is a whispering golden mouth, and we know that Vos is called the King of Whispers based on the critics' review. Now, this could be coincidence, sure, but in conjunction with the dozens of other things I've mentioned, I certainly believe that Vos talked Zeros into sacrificing his life to be born stronger. I find it hard to believe that with his almost infinite wisdom and thousands upon thousands of years of life, that Zeros would be stupid enough to sit down on the throne while his general has the staff of Armadil if it could truly kill him. This is definitely why I believe that Zeros didn't actually lose in a fight to Zamorak. He let Zamorak kill him so he could ascend. Just like many instances in the Zaltok and Erebus lore where it references this. Without Zamorak ascending to godhood and having the war in Pharynthri against Saradomin that awoke Guthix, creating the edicts to begin with, perhaps this world would be completely different. After all, one of the common tropes of the Erebus Horde is that progress demands sacrifice. At this point in the video, I was already convinced that Zeros was up to no good. However, I wasn't really sure of the relationship between Vos and Zeros. We know that Zeros spends alone time with the monolith, where Aurelius says it's his place to enact his divine will. We know that his throne is a whispering mouth, and we know that Vos has been influencing and corrupting the individuals of Sentistan, the Zeroshian capital. But I found something even more spooky to imply or prove the connection between this god of Erebus and Zeros. The whispering mouth in the throne room cutscene, which can be viewed from the Shar of Ma if you want to take a look for yourself, seemed to hold some more information or clues. On the mural behind Zeros is an infernal saying that is loosely translated to mean, "She is hidden among the stars," which appears to be a reference to the elder god Jas, which you can clearly see in a constellation in the center of that. But if you look around the mural, you'll see the constellations spell a couple different things, including V-O-S, Vos. While hunting for Easter eggs, I was tipped off to an image I had seen 1,000 times, but it could hold some pretty insane hints. This rune metric image I've seen for over a decade, and hidden in the chalkboard is something pretty juicy. If you look at the left side of the chalkboard, you'll notice something pretty interesting over the shoulder of Einstein Shrek. JWFBM. You may be wondering to yourself, what does Jawuffabum mean? Well, nothing. What this actually represents are the Elder Gods being the first initial of Jas, Win, Full, Bic, and Zeros' mother Ma. Which is kind of weird because if this is read as a math equation, it's basically saying that Ma is the greatest Elder God. I believe this to actually be the case because she most likely played the biggest role in the actual story of Fate, as the mother of Zeros and Saren, the force or womb for corruption in this universe. But why would I assume this has anything to do with Vos, Zeros, and Erebus? Well, if you look above the Elder God equation, there is a few dots that may go unnoticed, but on further inspection, it is actually Morse code. It represents a 3-letter word, and I bet you know what I'm going to say. VOS, indicating that Vos is above the Elder Gods. Interestingly enough, underneath of the Elder Gods is a small music schematic which represents sheet music. Now, this might seem unconnected, but the Elder Gods are uncommonly known as the Elder Choir. This is interesting mostly because of the fact minions of Zaltok often refer to themselves as the Silent Choir, further indicating that the forces of Erebus could perhaps contain Elder Gods, the opposite of this Elder Choir. Ultimately, we're going to have to wait and see what direction Jagex goes in with this, but I hope that all of you are just as excited as I am. Do you think that Zeros is lying about Erebus? Do you think that Voss has been controlling Zeros from behind the scenes? What do you believe Zeros' true motives are? Could Zaltok be involved? Are the black hands on Zeros' armor connected to Zaltok? Let me know in the comments section below. I really hope you enjoyed this video as much as I did making it. The hundreds of hours that I spent scouring the wiki, reading lore books, and just exploring for Easter eggs and fun hints were so worth it. I have another cool little Easter egg for you today before we go. If you're anything like me, you're impatiently waiting on the return of the Dark God Zeros, as he's one of the most captivating and interesting characters in all of RuneScape. If you go to the mysterious monolith in which he currently resides, as it's a portal to Erebus, and use the shard of Zeros on it, you actually get this chat head indicating that someone or something wishes to speak to you from the monolith. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to leave me a like, and if you're not already, subscribe to our channel to help support our small but passionate RuneScape journey.
We are changing the world. You trespass on a sacred moment. To be one of the first, blessed by his black radiance. Come then, shed your mortal form and rejoice. And you will not be able to save them.
I had always loved the sea, especially at night. When I looked up, I saw the colors and shapes beyond imagining, beyond comprehension. The pinks and greens spattered the sky with the shining of stars. The sea reflected each twinkling light on its rippled surface. In the calm of night, my boat rocked and swayed in the overwhelming vastness of the ocean. It was our custom, every cycle, to give an offering to the Leviathan, the regal, many-headed beast of the undercurrents. I had never seen it. To me, it was a child's story told thousands of times as a tale, outliving even the names of our eldest ancestors. Our lives have always been lived on Hanto, away from anyone or anything. Just us, our tales, and our traditions. Traditions that gave us some sort of purpose on this boring pile of sand and gunpowder. Tales that took my mind and attention away from the monotony of tribal politics and my islander lifestyle. It is easy now to imagine that I did not object to being chosen to offer these gifts. The rhythmic metronome of waves lapping against the hull soon became silent, as did the whole ocean. As far as I could see, the colors in twilight soon came down, falling rapidly around me, and a being came hurtling across the skin of the water, tearing it open like a wound. The wake it left was immense and sudden, but the waves parted before they got to me. With a flash of blue light from its chest, it stopped abruptly in front of me, and suddenly I was face to face with it. It was awe-inspiring. I was petrified, rooted to the spot like an island moa. It scanned me, breathing steadily and slowly, staring hard as though its gaze was penetrating my soul. The water beneath the creature did not stir. It was as though the ocean had frozen. The only movement, as far as I could grasp, was its unnervingly patient breath and the slow tilt of my boat, drawn outwards toward the creature, slowly caught in an inevitable tidal pull. Its voice was not booming or terrifying, more so like a stern father or preacher.
You belong to the tides now. You belong to the depths. Castile Griath, Fiarwalk Gal, Skek Lak, Odious. You belong to Othin Griath.
With that, it gently lifted the stars back into the sky, and then vanished behind the crests of the waves. The pinks and greens eased back into place, and I returned to where I began. In the calm sightlessness of night, my boat rocking and swaying in the overwhelming vastness of the ocean. I set a course toward waters I had never traveled before. I had always loved the sea, especially at night. When I looked down, I saw colors and shapes beyond imagining, beyond comprehension. The ritual is prepared. I have found the words in the old texts, and I have pieced together the symbols and the rhythm. It's beautiful, really, the song. Just the notes sung together in a strange harmony. To think how such a beautiful song could pierce the heavens itself and bring us our salvation. There is something behind the stones, the pebble of the old stories, a great intelligence filled with endless compassion and infinite mercy. As I read and studied, I could feel it touching my spirit, could feel as it guided me toward this moment. It wants me to be free. It wants us all to be free. Carapac objects, of course, as do some of the remaining council, but we've lost too many to fight amongst ourselves. The longer we wait, the more we lose to the great conflict. We simply cannot wait any longer. We must act now. They tell me that it's dark magic, that there is something wrong about it, but they are just upset because the solution comes from faith, not from their science. I ask you, does this ritual require the torture of children? Does it require the sacrifice of sentient life? No. Unlike their science, the ritual is bloodless. The ritual is pure. Just faith and music. What pure indication of merciful intent. So let them complain. Let them rant. We shall save the people. I go now to create a new future, free from chains, where we can forge our own destiny. They will say that the ritual went wrong, but it didn't. I was wrong to assume there would be no sacrifices. All great progress requires sacrifice. How can we forge a new future if we cannot let go of the old? But it worked. I am free. I no longer feel the pull. No longer am I chained to the stone. I can do as I please. I can act as I wish. I am free. Salvation came not from the light, but from the shadows. We are scared of the dark because it shows us that nothing is set in stone, that nothing is written. The darkness shows us that the world can be anything, anything we wish it to be, whereas the light just says, this is what it is. The light is a lie. It is a new set of change trapping us to the world as it is. But the darkness tells us, make the world what it should be. I felt his presence in the shadows. He reached out a hand forged of black stone, and he tore the chains from my soul. Then he laid the hand upon my heart and cut a line down my chest. It should have hurt, but there was no pain, only purpose. I reached inside my own chest and I pulled free my heart, for I did not need it. I took out my lungs because I was no longer bound to the air. I placed inside me a piece of his world, because only then can I truly be set free.
I returned a new Cranon, no longer trapped by the old forgotten religion, no longer enslaved to the uncaring gods. I am now his voice on this world, his ambassador. I will spread his message. I will save them all. And to think, I hesitated. I know what went wrong before. Why we only managed a brief glimpse of his magnificence. The ritual was flawed, too quick, too simple, too small. It's obvious, of course. Great music builds to its crescendo. It doesn't demand it immediately. I need to find the instruments. I need to find the right choir, not just Dragonkin. I need the others who this life has failed. Others willing to see the bigger picture, the solution to our problems. Others who need to be saved. Terraket is already with me, my old friend. He too has been blessed by his generosity, and we have both been granted the vastness of the oceans, where we might gather a new flock. Together, we shall explore the stars and seek out those who can be brought out of the light. I shall gather the lost and the abandoned, those whose homes have been taken from them, but who are already blessed in his eyes. I shall gather them and bring them here that they may be the strength that the ritual can call from. Those who have been cast out of their world for seeing the truth of things. The shapers of souls and the undying. They shall empower the ritual and let the harmony resonate across the plains. Those who had everything but lost it all. They walk the world in masks, pretending. I shall let their secrecy shroud the ritual until it is too late to be stopped. Those who come willingly step into the shadows, who see the stain of corruption on this world and wish to see the truth. They shall be my voice with which to pierce the heavens.
This ambassador presents quite the intriguing specimen. It is clearly powerful and deeply devoted to its nameless deity. But it is also clearly dead, and yet not. It is not the animated remains of the living, I am certain enough of that. Yet it is most certainly not alive. This is fascinating enough already to pique my interest. But what is perhaps most intriguing of all is the soul. The soul is bright and booming, a wonderful example of something that has lived and lived well. But what's most intriguing is that there is a hole in the soul's pattern. Souls are like liquid. Any damage done to them eventually flows back together into a cohesive form. Perhaps with some scarring, but complete again. But this soul, it's as though a piece of the soul is missing, and an emptiness has filled it, preventing it from reforging. Really quite remarkable. The implications are fascinating, and I confess I would love to know more. But perhaps most remarkable is the offer it gave to me. Reforge House Sharon, and reclaim my place as one of the Magister Lords of my home. This offer naturally appeals, but what impresses me most is that it would know to make such an offer. There are few who know of House Charon, let alone would care to restore it. Fewer still would know my connection to it, for it has been many centuries since I last walked on Terragard. But this creature, this ambassador, simply appeared to me and offered me this bargain. The terms? So simple. All it needed was souls. Souls as power. Souls as batteries for a ritual in a long-forgotten ruin. I have many spares, and my apprentice will make his move soon enough that there will be many more broken pieces to take advantage of. To restore my house, and only in exchange for such simple sorceries? How can I refuse?
Once we were great, but that world was taken from us. We were all but forgotten, abandoned to this strange little world, where we withered and we withdrew. Yet still, Tezcatlipoca did not forsake us. Instead, we were given gifts, and for some of us, those gifts let us leave the burning light of the surface and to come below into his kingdom. Here, the ambassador claims to be his voice on this world, though he calls Tezcatlipoca by a different name. The strange thing is, that name does not feel wrong. Is it an aspect, or does Tezcatlipoca have many names? The ambassador has promised us vengeance and a chance for our people to rise again and reclaim the world that was taken from us. We are to be his fists, his claws, and the teeth that rend the enemy apart. And we are to be the might from which Tezcatlipoca will draw upon to anchor himself to our world. It is right that we are the strength, right that we are the might, for we are Moanu, and we know nothing of weakness. This is humiliating, to be brought to this, to be bargaining with these disgusting, fallen things. My Avernic shell itches and crawls, and a fire burns deep in its belly. I long to be rid of it, but I must endure. But so it is. Our plans to summon the 100-handed one in Damonheim failed, due to the intervention of the Guardians of Guthix. Perhaps this Cranon can succeed where we failed. If he does so, we will take the power of the 100-handed one for ourselves, and use it to reclaim our rightful home world. So here stand I, Yojir, scion of Infernus, bowing and scraping and entreating, an ambassador to monsters. The tribunal has sent its agents to assist me. There is obviously more at work here, for the tribunal has always believed itself above my methods. I am not part of their scheming. I have no desires to bend my knee to Agnes or her agents. This is my world, and I will not grant them a foothold. Still, they are useful. Their power adds to the ritual, and I can draw upon the tribunal's strength to give me that final edge I need to break the walls of our prison. We will all be free.
My lord Terraket, the Amnesian monks are requesting that they be placed further away from the Moanu delegation. Apparently, the Moanu keep eating some of their functionaries and it makes it difficult to get things done. Perhaps we should move them nearer to the Soul Shapers? They seem to share similar physical characteristics, which should make things easier. I await your wisdom, Eketus.
Eketus, I do not care about the comfort of these soft and whimpering things. They are here to assist in the greatest feat of magical engineering this world has ever seen. Their comfort is irrelevant. Only their obedience matters. I suggest you raise with the Moanu that their eating habits are causing a delay in the ritual, and remind them of the consequences of such actions. Terraket.
Dear Lady Himiko, it is a pleasure to make your acquaintance again. It really has been too long. I am impressed with the work you have done to craft such a magnificent faux religious order, and persuading them to be so fanatical to an obviously fantastical cause. Quite remarkable. I really must arrange a dinner with you sometime so that we may discuss your techniques at greater length. I believe we could both learn something from one another. Regards, Oreb, Magister of House Sharon.
Dear Magister Oreb, you seem to be confused. I do not offer schemes nor falsehoods. The Order offers a true solution to the inherent corruption of our spirits. Our souls are all stained, and we offer the only true method to cleanse them. Those who follow me do so because they see the truth and are willing to embrace it. Yours faithfully, Lady Himiko.
Dear Lady Himiko, forgive me. I assumed it was reason, not religion, that drove you. I find faith to be such a fickle thing, so vague and immeasurable. And in my experience, the effect on the soul is remarkably limited. Still, if it works for you, I cannot possibly decry it. Yours sincerely, Oreb, Magister of House Sharon. P.S. You are aware there is a spy in your order, I trust.
Dear Oreb, there are no spies in the Order. You are mistaken. Regards, Lady Himiko.
Dear Lady Himiko, no? So your wards are intentionally flawed. I wonder if you would care to explain the reasoning behind that. What advantage is there in allowing the World Guardian a direct entry to your inner sanctum? Yours in curiosity, Oreb, Magister of House Sharon. Dear my Lord Ambassador, you have been discovered. There is a traitor in the Amnesians, and they have tipped off the World Guardian. I urge you to caution. The World Guardian is more powerful and more dangerous than any soul I have encountered so far. They have slain me many times, and will do so again before the ritual is complete. They are warded by the dead god Guthix in a way I do not yet understand. They will be immune to your subtle manipulations, and it will take more power than you expect to destroy them. Do not underestimate them. Respectfully, Oreb, Magister of House Sharon.
The World Guardian. I wonder if this means Pride Slayer. I have dreamt of that name for centuries. A nightmare that warps even my dreams and turns my deepest prayers into curses. Warnings perhaps from my Lord to not be complacent, to not give in to the brash overconfidence of my people. I shall prepare then. I shall summon a Leviathan, and I shall bestow upon it the blessings of my Lord. Terraket shall raise an undead army, and I shall prepare all of my followers to stand against them should they arrive. The ritual will not fail.
The ritual is reaching its crescendo. The harmony is building. It's been so long in the making that I can scarcely believe it. I have spent centuries forming the caverns to properly echo the songs. I have weathered the runes into the very rocks themselves, so they are as much a part of the ocean depths as the coral that covers them. I have forged an army of the undead, and I have placed each of them at key points around the ritual, such that the fragments that remain of their souls may act as a lens, amplifying and redirecting the ritual energies. 10,000 souls have been drawn from the afterlife, courtesy of our Terra Guardian ally, and forged into great blades with which to cut away at the walls of this universe. If only Karapak could see this now. See how impotent his science truly is. Faith is the true power. And with that faith, we will tear open a gateway to heaven, and we will bring his gaze upon us.
So, you come to witness this great moment. To be present as his gaze is turned upon this world.
I can understand such dreams. Come then, shed your mortal form and rejoice. Let the many mouths of my Leviathan consume you. Die, knowing that you are fit for nothing more than as food for my pets. And perhaps not even that. I have seen the dead walk, but never so brazenly. You are rotting before my eyes, and your presence here only hastens your decay. Halt, mortal! You shall go no further!
Hey, Stinky, where the fuck is Zaltok?
Cranon cannot be stopped! The ritual cannot be prevented!
I am the World Guardian, and I will save them all. Guthix, please! I can't do this without you!
I have always been with you, World Guardian.
You trespass on a sacred moment. You shall go no further, abomination.
I am the World Guardian, and I will save them all.
Must you fight so hard to reduce all the world to mediocrity? So be it. Have a taste of his power. You pathetic one. Behold his glory. Fall now and be forgotten. If you will not rise, then you shall fall. You think this is a victory? You live only because he has not noticed you. But soon, his gaze will fall upon this world, and you will not be able to save them.
I guess now that I saved the world, I can take a couple days off. It's definitely nice to be home. Alright, son, it's time for bed.
Daddy, will you read me a book?
Well, I did find this ancient book on one of my adventures once. I guess I can read that to you.
Cranon's ancient journal. There is a solution, an answer to our predicament. Carapac denies it, the council denies it, but it's there. An answer hidden away in the ancient texts, the old religions that we have so sadly forgotten. There's an old story of the great heroes Satyrak and Vokun and the Gauntlet of Flame. We all know that story. We were told it as children, back before the curse was laid. I remember my grandmother. She sat me down and she told me the story. It goes something like this. Satyrak and Vokun had left their village to seek adventure. Along the journey, they encountered an old dragonkin who told them that there was a great treasure hidden within the kingdom of Shadow. A stone that would grant them wondrous powers. So the two heroes, ready for adventure, headed into the kingdom. They crossed the normal trials, the haunted forest, the unclimbable mountains, and flew through raging storms before finally arriving in the kingdom of Shadow. A cold and sinister place, full of strangeness and dark sorceries. they found themselves drawn to an old cathedral, crafted from the stone ages prior by a long-dead people. In it they found an old man, huddled in front of an altar on which sat a glistening jewel. "Greetings, old man," cried out Setirak, for he was a gregarious sort and greeted each person as a friend in waiting. "We have come to take the great gemstone, so that we might use its magic to bring wonder to our people." But the old man said nothing. Instead he drew out his hand, in which he held a dull black pebble covered in dirt. Setirak ignored him and took the gemstone from the altar. It glistened and shone like the noonday sun, and Setirak felt himself overcome with joy. He returned to the people, and there was much rejoicing. "I've always felt it was an old tale. I remember asking Grandma, 'What of Fokun?' and Grandma would just smile and say he had a different story. I have studied that story for decades now, and I can find only one answer to my question. He took the pebble. That's the real lesson. That's the story that we need to remember. You see, we rejoice at Setirak because he followed the other's story. He got the stone and he returned to the village to tell them his tales. He became our puppet, our toy, and we told his story. He was ours, but Fokun took the pebble. Fokun found a way out of our story and into his own. We don't tell his story because it's now indisputably his. He is free." The stone, that black pebble, that is the answer. And while the scientists and alchemists look to the future to find a solution, I look to the past. I look to our old religions, to our old stories, and I know the answer is there. I am looking for pebbles. The others ignore me. They tell me that I'm a foolish old priest obsessed with old forgotten stories. They tell me that the answer lies in new discoveries, in alchemy and magic. They believe that they can break the chains by pouring molten metal over children, or by tearing off the limbs of criminals and test subjects. But there's a truth in the old stories, in the old prayers, and in the wisdom of the old gods. Let them have their science. As always, I have my fate. My fate overcomes all obstacles. The writing is illegible for several pages. It was always there, begging for us to discover it. I can't believe how easy it was to put it all together. If you take the old stories, the old parables, you can see the bigger picture. The real story, it's all there, hidden in the stories that are not told. It is there in the tales of Fokun, who took a pebble and was no longer part of the legend. It is there in the hidden story of Teltas, who stepped into the shadows, never to be spoken of again. All of the stories, every last one, has a piece of the story left untold, the great network of forgotten and empty takes. I pieced them all together, and there it was, a hidden story, a story of possibilities, the hole in the wall that leads to a bigger truth. When I found them all, I found the words and the symbols I needed to reach out. It's strange, like music that is waiting to be played, but I am not the composer, merely the conductor. It's truly beautiful. I shall bring my notes to the other members of the priesthood. With their backing, perhaps the council will finally see reason. We can end this curse and the evils that come with it.